years on Fox and on social media, where he hawks so-called anti-woke products.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. And then, whatever the standards, whatever the combat standards were, say, in, 1995, let's just make those the standards.
I have friends who've texted me who are not very political saying, I'm coming to Washington, D.C. today because I can't handle what's happening in my country.
These folks on the lawn, and there were more than I'd ever seen, these are not conspiracy theorists motivated just by lies. That's a bunch of nonsense that people want to tell us. These are people that understand first principles. They love freedom and they love free markets.
I'm reminded about the hole that was on my wall when I got rid of my Harvard degree. Thankfully, I replaced it with an honorary gunsmithing program degree from the Pennsylvania Gunsmith School.
I don't think I've washed my hands for 10 years. Really, I don't really wash my hands ever.
Help me!
No, I inoculate myself. It's just not, germs are not a real thing. I can't see them, therefore they're not real.
Totally anti-woke. They're not going for any of that garbage. And I need to show you their product one more time. It's a grenade. Caliber Coffee. What's their motto? Faith, family, firearms, coffee. It's veteran-owned and damn good.
Freedom.
Freedom. Freedom.
Hegseth is someone who's had Donald Trump's ear for a very long time. Washington Post reports this, quote, Hegseth was a key player, for instance, in convincing the then president to intervene in the war crimes cases of 3 U.S. service members in 2019. That effort led to pardons for 2 Army officers, Matthew L. Goldston and Clint Lawrence, in separate murder cases, and a redemption of sorts for Navy SEAL Edward Gallagher, who had seen his rank reduced after a military jury acquitted him of murder charges, but found him guilty of posing for a photograph with a corpse. Using his platform on Fox News, Hegseth lobbied repeatedly on behalf of the 3 men, even as platoon members serving under Lawrence and Gallagher described the killings as cold-blooded and unnecessary. One squad leader in their platoon called it, quote, straight murder. Trump dropped charges against Goldston, pardoned Lawrence, and reversed Gallagher's demotion. Now the nomination of Pete Hegseth is setting off alarm bells at the Pentagon. Politico reporting this, quote, national security officials and defense analysts had braced for surprises from Trump after experiencing his first 4 years in office. But even grading on that curve, they say the announcement of Pete Hegseth caught them totally off guard. Trump puts the highest value on loyalty. That's Eric Edelman saying that, who served as the Pentagon's top policy official during the Bush administration. Quote, it appears that one of the main criteria that's being used is how well do people defend Donald Trump on television? One assessment was more blunt. Who the F is this guy, said a defense industry lobbyist who spoke anonymously, to be candid. Should he be confirmed, Hegseth's first order of business will likely be that purge of Pentagon top brass. Here's what he said on a podcast 6 days ago.
You got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. Obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke has got to go.
Gotta go. The future of the United States military on the line as Donald Trump nominates a Fox News weekend morning show host to be the Secretary of Defense is where we begin the hour. Retired 4-star Army General and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey's here, plus retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, founder of the Democratic Majority Action PAC, Amy McGrath is here, and the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carasone, is here. With me at the table, host of the Independent Americans podcast, founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America, Paul Rieckhoff, is here. Paul, I'm going to start with you because you predicted some of these moves earlier this week. Did you have an inside line, or how did you know?
No, but I know Pete Hegseth, and I know his relationship with Trump. Almost everybody in the veterans community knows him and knows how close he is to Trump because he talks about it all the time. I would have predicted him for press secretary maybe, or maybe even chief of staff. They might have tried to put him in at VA secretary, but this is a very, very radical and bold move. And I think it's a reflection of Hegseth's loyalty to Trump more than anything else. Hegseth is a very effective culture warrior. He's very good at communications and at the religious war and at the political war, but he is the most unqualified candidate for this position in the history of America. He is so underqualified that from the moment the news broke, my phone, and I'm sure McCaffrey's and everybody else's phones blew up with everybody saying, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Is this serious? The opportunity for him to do damage is really, really profound. And we're talking about a guy who says he wants no women in the military, he wants to remove all diversity initiatives, he wants to fire all the senior leadership at the department that used to be called Department of War. This is the Pentagon with 2.7 million employees, the most diverse workforce on the planet. This is very dangerous, but it's also on strategy because Trump, I'd ask everybody to take a big deep breath. Trump is throwing like a giant flash grenade into America. He wants to disorient people. He wants to flood the zone. And we all need to take a big, deep breath and recognize the threat for what it is. Don't dismiss all these videos because Hegseth could very well be the Secretary of Defense. And we as a country have to think about putting up those guardrails because this is what it looks like when there's no guardrails. Well,
and I guess the only thing I would say is he will be the Secretary of Defense if people think Senate Republicans are a bulwark against anything.
I don't. And I mean, I've said this publicly. I'm not counting on the Democrats either. I mean, that's what we see now. I mean, Trump has the opportunity to run the table. And I think, you know, voices that we've heard over the last couple of months may not even resonate. So now you're, again, talking about people inside the Pentagon. After they try to execute a purge, you're going to have the very foundation of the fabric of our country trying to hold the line. Trump's going for the Pentagon first because it's the Pentagon that stopped him last time, right? This is where Milley held the line and stopped him from deploying the National Guard against American civilians. That's why he's going to the Pentagon and the defense industry first, because it's the most formidable resistance to what he wants to execute.
General McCaffrey, lifelong DOJ folks have said, well, it's going to fall to the line officers now. Paul Rykoff just said it's going to fall to the men and women of the military to hold the line. I mean, I come back to a question I asked for 4 years. Why didn't it fall to former leaders like Secretary Mattis or General Milley to speak out so that it wouldn't fall to these men? And I would say the same about the Attorney General. I mean, why when the leaders refuse to weigh into our politics, does it fall to the men and women who make up the career officers of both agencies to hold the line against an American president?
Well, look, I would probably take somewhat different approach than Paul has articulated. He's got a very sound case, what he put on the table. I think this SecDef nominee is actually very qualified. I mean, we've had Harvard professors, congressmen, intellectuals as Secretary of Defense. This nominee comes in with Harvard, Princeton, and a combat infantry badge earned as a rifle platoon leader in combat. He's watched these issues for over a decade. He's published books. He's very much in touch with the veterans community. So I think he's a very astute character, and he probably will be surrounded by people who understand how to manage this gigantic enterprise. The reason to be concerned is policies. You know, we're going to try and unravel things like our commitment to NATO. We're going to turn Ukraine over to criminal invasion by a murderous thug, Putin. Are we going to try and tell women in the armed forces that we're not a merit-based institution, we're one that is involved in gender wars? So it's policies we need to focus on. By the way, I'm convinced he will be confirmed in the Senate. So we've got to deal with this in a realistic manner.
All right, so General McCaffrey, let's deal with policy as it pertains to Vladimir Putin. Let me show you what he said about what Putin's really trying to do. Not so bad.
I found overinflated from the beginning this idea that Vladimir Putin's attack on Ukraine was going to lead to nuclear war or war across the continent. I've always felt like it was, from the beginning, like a couple days in, I was like, this feels like a Putin's give me my back war. It kind of feels like, I feel like you've been pushing pretty hard, and we used to have the former Soviet Union, and we're pretty proud of that. And Ukraine was a part of it, and all these other countries. And I want my back. And I think I'm at the right time where I'm powerful enough to do it.
I mean, he wants his ship back. That's the country of Ukraine. Do you think he will be confirmed, thinking that Ukraine should be given back to Putin?
Well, look, this is the hardest part to understand by President-elect Trump, or by his nominee to be SecDef, or by the 80% of Republicans who apparently will say into pollsters they think the Russians are our friends. And in fact, what we're dealing with is a dictator Putin, who's invaded 4 other nations, who murders his political opponents. The most oppressed people in the world by Russian aggression are Russians. He is a threat to Western Europe. They're keenly aware of it. France, Germany, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, both joining NATO. So I find it hard to understand why anyone would be an apologist for the murderous aggression by Putin against Ukraine. Makes no sense. Policy matters. If we walk away from NATO, we will unravel a good bit of U.S. national security.
General McCaffrey, you inspire so much confidence and trust among our viewers, and I'd just like to draw you out a little bit on your confidence in Mr. Hegseth to do the job. Do you know him? Has he called you? Have you met with him? What makes you feel that he would be good at this job when so much of the instant reaction is concern?
Well, again, good at his job. I'm very concerned about his policies from day one on, and he's obviously in tune with the president-elect of the United States. And I don't think the House or the Senate will oppose him. And so I think we're likely to see very dangerous national security policies being enacted. So I would separate his personal competence, which is considerable. And looking back at former SecDefs, by the way, almost nobody's prepared to manage 2.8 million person globally deployed civilian and military workforce. So there'll be others in there that understand how to do that. But I'd also go back that when Trump at the time, when he lost the election, was trying, I thought, run a coup against the United States. And he put a team over in the Pentagon, a retired lieutenant colonel, White House functionary, not confirmed by the Senate. He sent 4 or 5 unstable characters over with him. And had it not been for General Milley, I think we would have seen another overt threat to the safety of the American people. So this nominee is not in that category. He's actually a very intelligent guy. He understands defense issues, but his policies are in tune with Trump, who's a threat to U.S. national security.
Amy, let me show you some of what General McCaffrey's talking about, the ways in which Trump sought to use the military in his first term. This starts with former Secretary of Defense Esper.
I just think about what you wrote in your book, and that during the George Floyd marches and protests in 2020, he asked about shooting protesters. And as you wrote, you said, you quoted him saying, can't you just shoot them in the legs or something? And so when he's saying that the enemy from within should potentially be handled by the National Guard, and if necessary, the U.S. military, do you fear that he would try to utilize the National Guard, the military, against U.S. citizens?
Yes, I do, of course, because I lived through that. And I saw over the summer of 2020 where President Trump and those around him wanted to use the National Guard in various capacities in cities such as Chicago and Portland and Seattle. And of course, there was a moment in time, as you just described, where he, on that early date in June, where he wanted to bring in active duty military as well. So that's what equally concerns me about his comment would be the use of the military in these types of things.
Have joined.
You can hear me?